When it comes to researching, honestly, you always start off with the first thing. What are you gonna research? I mean, honestly, that's where I started, and I have selected healthcare. I didn't select that as my first option. I'm gonna be completely honest. My first option was abortion. Wrong thing. You don't want to talk about that. Can't really debate it. Not that good. And you see, the reason why I selected healthcare is because it's rooted in the things that I'm interested in. So I'm interested in politics, I'm interested in economics. Okay, I'm interested in those two things a lot. I'm interested in computers, but there's not really that much you can like debate about. Really, I thought about it, and I could talk about quantum computing, but at the same time, there's a general consensus that it's gonna eventually be the main way of computing. There's no real debate around that. So, yeah. The next step, of course, is to find your sources. I mean, that's where anybody would start off. So for me, I like to go on EBSCO first, because if I find a really good article, I want to use that one and not like a random source or something I find on Google, because it has a lot more credibility than those, because it's a research paper. It's a paper that a lot of people went over. It's a lot safer, I guess you would call it. I remember going through these sources. I'm recording this afterwards. Of course, I have the notes of my journal, and I remember I felt overwhelmed because I had a very large topic to cover. So I had everything open from my book, which I have behind me, just talking about healthcare in general, to sources being specific about what they want to do. So this kind of narrowed it down when I got on to step 3. Step 3, of course, was to create my annotated bibliography, which was very, very difficult. I am so glad that there was I guess, an example, because if not, I would have been completely lost, absolutely lost. I really needed that to help me with mine. That's because when I was first going through, I didn't know what it was at all. So I read through it and I was like, oh, that's well, thank goodness I didn't get that far, because I only got a page in before I was like, okay, I wasn't supposed to write the research paper. I don't know why I was thinking that anyways. It got done, and by the end of it, I figured out that the topic I picked was way entirely too out of range for an 8-page paper. I really needed to narrow it down, so I did narrow it down. I narrowed it down to how we could implement universal healthcare in any way, really. Mostly because I came to the conclusion that universal healthcare was the best option you had, because if not, let's say you were to roll back. All right, the idea I have generally is, if you were to roll back, I don't know, restrictions on things, I think that eventually prices may go down, because they'd actually have to start competing rather than like giving it to people. But the issue I have with that is that would be incredibly irresponsible, because even that is based off the theory that it would go down. It's not even a guarantee. If it doesn't, then people are going to die. So you can't really exactly do that in any real world. That wouldn't be a possible. I guess that moves on to step 4. Step 4 for me was really getting down a first draft, but first draft is more like my final draft, I'm being honest with myself. I wrote the first draft over a course of like 4-ish days, because it took me a lot longer than I expected to. I remember actually picking a side one day to do it. It didn't get done that one day. I got 4 pages out of the 8 pages I had done. It was bad. Oh my goodness, it was so bad. So it took me a while. I remember being incredibly frustrated and worried, because I only gave myself a week to do this, and it really, really messed with me. I mean, it was just, who I was like, can also sleep. And I guess that leads on to step 5. In step 5, you basically take that first draft and you go through it and you critique it. So for me personally, what I did was I first went through and got an organization ready. So I usually write out everything, and afterwards I go through it and figure out an order that I want. I figured out that the first half of the essay I wanted to talk about the problems that we have with our current system, and then the second half I could show like a light into what a new system would fix. And then the kind of the middle was like a transitionary, where I talked about insurance in general. I didn't necessarily have a good place to put it because it was almost an argument against both, except for not really for universal insurance. Because when I was talking about universal insurance, the reason why I think it would work better is because it holds the insurance companies more accountable for actually having to pay for it, if that makes sense. Because they're getting only a certain amount, so if they have to actually negotiate, they'd probably negotiate a lot better than they do now. That was my general idea, but it could also work as an argument against universal insurance. It almost kind of threw a wrench in my system, because I really wanted to use that paragraph because it kind of showed what was wrong with the current system now. So it was very difficult, but you know, once I had that done, I had some people read it over. I went on Discord servers and I just gave people this essay, and I had hey, you want to read over my essay real quick? You mind taking a couple minutes out your day? And it worked. I guess, hey, I had a couple of good suggestions. One person noted a sentence that did not make sense at all. Like, I would have turned in an essay that just, there was a full sentence that was like, what did you even just try to write? I guess that leads on to my next step. I guess I already kind of lead in. I basically, I just looked back, I read over it several times. I mean, I wasn't too happy with it at all. I really wasn't happy, and I guess I just tried my best, but you know, I guess it ended up fine. I have a problem. Turns out there's this thing called one monitor, so I kind of fixed that with my VR headset. Oh man, I feel silly. So essentially what this allowed me to do was I could write and at the same time look at my sources while having everything up on the screen at the same time, rather than trying to scrunch it all on one screen, and really wouldn't end well. So, you know, surprisingly this worked a lot better than you'd expect. But who would have knew VR headsets are better than anything like Beat Saber? I mean, it's actually useful. It helped me from distractions. I didn't use my phone the entire time while I was doing this. I could sit down for hours and just do it. By the end of this project, I can't lie, there was only one thing on my mind, and that was just sleep. I could not get any of that. I was probably around 4 hours of sleep for like 3 days straight. It was terrible. Hopefully in future assignments I think more forward than I did this time, you know, because this is probably my first time writing something of this length. I were recommending someone else, I'd recommend them to do it in the morning rather than trying to crunch it in at night. Definitely affected my writing when I was going through and checking it over. It definitely messed with the proofreading of it. Luckily, I caught most of it before I turned it in. There was one error that I found after I turned it in, but I was like, well, that's I can't change that now, so yeah. You know, step 7. I guess we're on step 7. I lumped step 6 in with 2 things I had in my script here. So what happened is on step 7, you take a step back, you relax, you got yourself a research paper. Congratulations. Oh my goodness, I just did it. I'm not keeping this part. Ugh. So step number 7,